Okay.
All right, so we're joined for our final guest of the school year from Atlanta, Jackson State alum, native of Macomb, Mississippi, environmental scientist, STEM advocate, uh, new mother, you name it. She's wearing a lot of hats, doing so many great things over there in Georgia. Taimei Harris, thank you so much for taking some time for us today. Now, before we get into everything, you are a graduate of Jackson State University, a proud graduate of Jackson State, originally from Macomb. So we like to hear about the educational background of all of our guests. And I know you speak very highly of your time there, and you've gotten multiple degrees since then. So take us through your educational background because it's quite impressive.
Okay, so I kind of prepared a little PowerPoint
Oh, awesome.
to go just to get some bullets in so I can flow with what I wanted to talk
Sure.
about.
Sure.
And
Now, and then I almost forgot to add, I got a room full here with me at Velma Jackson. This is our computer science engineering class, and we're recording this for all of our friends in Madison County schools, middle schools and high schools, and for our YouTube channel. So I say that all the time, and then I forgot it this time, and I've done it all year. So yeah, you do have the ability to share. So anything you want to share, we'd love to see it.
okay, and just feel free,
Sure.
any questions in there, that's fine. So let me know if you can see this thing on my end.
All
Can you
right.
see that?
Yes.
Okay, and um, let's see if I can get it to. How about now?
Yes. Love it.
Okay. Okay, so like you said, just give you a background, and what I kind of wanted to do was just kind of try and build up and summarize my journey to where I am and how I got here, if that's okay. Kind of like let my little story unfold.
Sure.
Um, so let's see. So hey everybody, just wanted to again introduce myself. My name is Taimei Harris. I'm from Macomb, Mississippi. And it's a pleasure to be here speaking to you guys today with Mr. Pygod's STEM class. So let's see if I get this thing going. All right, and I just wanted to show you the presentation of my outline, which I'll just tell you a little bit about me, where I'm from, some of my influences, my major, my career, some things where life just happens, a little bit of my background, what I do in present day, an environmental faith scientist, and maybe just hit some points about Black representation in STEM, and then I'll leave it open for questions. So like you said, I'm from Macomb, Mississippi, born and raised, where I'm also a product of the Macomb School District. So when it comes to career path, the career path that I've taken, I think it kind of stemmed from my dad, who was a science and math teacher in the Macomb School District.
That's awesome.
And I figured I'd just plug in there that what's crazy is my dad actually began teaching in the times when they first began integrating the school systems.
Wow.
So yeah, I guess you can say my dad is old. So he used to have me test out some of his lab experiments and take notes on what happened, whether the experiment was successful or if it failed. I took like really intricate details of what happened in those experiments. And I remember at the time, I really hated that stuff. And I said that I'd never be a lab rat. I said that I really thought it was boring. So even though I hated it then, I like to think that that's somewhat of, it gave me a heads up and I followed in his footsteps. So from high school, I attended Jackson State University for undergraduate work. I initially majored in biology pre-med. I didn't even want to go to JSU at first. I wanted to go to Howard in DC.
Wow.
But as I stated, my parents were old, so they were not about to take me to Howard. I didn't know much about traveling. So I chose Jackson State because my best friend was going to Jackson State. And I was like, let me go because I know I'm going to have to catch a ride with somebody. So that's how I ended up at Jackson State University. And I like to also throw out there, I did march in the boom. I played the tuba at Jackson State. So after completing my BS from Jackson State, I began working like fresh out of college on the environmental side of science in the private sector. So I worked for Marshall Durbin Laboratory, which is a poultry company.
Wow.
There I worked I started as a laboratory technician, and I started there because I was kind of on the fence with did I want to go to med school. So I was studying. So I took the job as I studied and prepared for the MCATs. As I worked my way up to wastewater chemist, and then I became a lab manager at Marshall Durbin. So there I kind of trained, managed chemists and technicians, and basically I just ensured that the results were provided to plant operations, external customers, and different types of shareholders. So I left Marshall Durbin in the private sector to work for Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality. And there I was an air and metals chemist. And so at DEQ, I mainly collected and tested like a variety of samples, different data information to determine the impacts on human health and the environment, basically around the state of Mississippi. So with that, I digested some water samples, determining if there were any trace elements in the waters provided, soils, waste, and tissues. And I kind of tested those with ICP mass spec, some instrumentation that I used. So like I said, initially, the original plan was to go to med school. I studied, prepared for the MCATs. I was accepted to med school.
Wow.
And somewhere in there, my dad got really sick.
Um,
So I was literally driving back and forth from Jackson to Mississippi to see him. And over that time frame, my mind was all over the place. So I wasn't sure, if I'd be able to make that shift mentally from the environmental side to the medical side of science. So I considered teaching. And at this point, I was just, things happen. Life happens. You adjust accordingly. So life happened. I'm thinking, do I want to teach? So, and you guys are probably going to say I was all over the place, but I completed my master's of science and teaching in science and math education at Jackson State also. And I basically went back to JSU for that because I wanted to be closer to home, because everything that was going on with my dad. And while in that program, my dad passed away. So I had a mentor talk me into applying to Jackson State's environmental science PhD program at the time, since I was already working in that field. So yes, I went to school. All my degrees came from Jackson State University.
oh,
And in hindsight, thinking about it, it worked out based off what was happening. I was familiar with the professors. I kind of knew the ropes already. So that made my journey I'm not gonna say easy because it was very difficult, but that helped on my career path. So and I'm just over here talking.
no, this is all good stuff, and we've talked a lot about data, about
Yeah.
how important it is because in any scientific, engineering, computer field, the data is how everything has to go. And we talked about the engineering process, about using the data to make decisions. And especially now, and we just had Earth Day, but
Yeah.
especially now with COVID, the environmental science aspect is even more important.
Mm-hmm. And just I also wanted to add that saying that I went to Jackson State for my BS, my master's, and my PhD, which was actually required for my current job. I did want to add and let you guys know that according to the National Science Foundation, of the 50,000, I'm thinking about money, people who do get PhDs, only about 5.4% of those people are Black people. And 4.4% of those are Black women.
Wow.
So again, like I told you guys that I worked in the private sector, and for me, I guess I get to talking and tell you about stuff, and I'm not even using my slides. But so just to continue some of the background information, like I said, I studied environmental science at Jackson State for graduate school. So in my academic career, that background, I did a lot of research in the coastal wetlands of Mississippi at Grand Bay NER. And my research, I studied spatial patterns and temporal dynamics of Juncus romerianus. It's a dominated wetland vegetation, and the dominated wetland vegetation characteristics and carbon stocks of the NER. So basically, I studied changes in time and over space in the wetland plant. So, not if you're not familiar with a wetland is an area of land that's either covered by water or saturated with water. And they serve many different purposes, such as improving water quality, protecting and maintaining the ecosystem's productivity, just to name a few. And a NER, me saying that I worked in Grand Bay NER, a NER is a National Estuarine Research Reserve. And it's basically a network of relatively pristine estuaries, which are places where the fresh water from the land mixes with salt water from the sea.
Wow.
And they're established across the nation for long-term research, education, and coastal stewardship.
Wow.
So with my research, I wanted to take a look at carbon storage of surface soil, use remote sensing and map and evaluate those spatial patterns in the distribution of that soil carbon. And then I also wanted to determine the biogeochemical, topographic, and vegetation related factors that affected the soil. So my research actually fell under this NOAA ECSC mission, Environmental Cooperative Science Center. So their mission is to actually educate a new generation of abstract scientists in these NOAA-related sciences, particularly from underrepresented minority groups. It was under FAMU. We worked underneath them in the program. And with that mission, they wanted to develop the natural and social science tools for integrated assessments of ecosystem health in support of coastal environmental decision-making. So hence my studying in the wetlands. So I applied to the fellowship, and with the fellowship, a lot of times, just depending on your background, we're not aware of all the monies available when you go to school. So being that you guys are what, 9th, 10th grade?
Yeah, we had all 4 grades.
Okay, so these are the times, as you figure out what it is that you want to do, start looking at the scholarships and programs available to get a free ride. Start looking and preparing yourself now. So money doesn't necessarily have to be an issue. And sometimes it's hard, but a lot of times it's word of mouth. A lot of times it comes from internships. So it's out there. And with that program, I got the fellowship. They paid my tuition, and they actually paid me a stipend to go to school.
Wow.
So that was when I resigned from the state job and I pursued my PhD full time.
That's incredible.
And before I started the program, my mother passed away. So while these are tragic things that are happening, I want to throw them out there to let you know that so much stuff happens in life that can derail you, but you just have to keep going and adjust accordingly. So for some reason, it seems like the doors just kind of open for me on the environmental path. And so I kind of feel like my career actually chose me, and the opportunities that became available from the fellowship opened a lot of doors as well. And these doors actually landed me a job in the federal government as a federal environmental fate scientist. Wow. In the pesticides program, office in the federal government. So environmental fate scientist. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with fate, but what is environmental fate? Basically, it's the destiny or the pathway of any chemical,
wow,
biological substance, in my case, pesticides, or a pollutant after the release into the environment. And an example would be how the fate provides the fate provides an indication of what happens to this pesticide once it enters the environment, as well as likely exposure levels for non-target organisms. So also here, I'm out the lab now. So I'm not in the lab. I'm not working with chemicals hands-on. I'm on the regulatory side. So on the regulatory science side. So now we're reviewing data from the labs and taking that data and creating assessments for the public. And we go through so many different things in-house, so many peer, and I just say a federal scientist because, I just want to put out here that I'm here because you invited me, and I'm not actually on official business as a representative of my job. So, so many different things take place in-house once you review the stories, once you prepare the assessments. Communication is essential because you're working with so many different backgrounds of scientists with different experiences that you have to be able to communicate depending on what you're working on to get out to the public. You're aware of litigation reasons, purposes, and things like that. So I review these studies that come in from the lab. That data is submitted. I'm determining the persistence of these chemicals, like how long they'll stay in the field or in the soils or whatever test that it is that we're working on. And I identify and I communicate those deficiencies through different risk assessments and things like that. So I'm also evaluating these pesticides and the exposure data in the phase studies that document the product's behavior and environment to estimate product exposure and its degradation products in the soil and sediment, water, groundwater, and sometimes the air to make determinations for the public about these risks, about the results that come from the risks. And I also model the fate of these chemicals in these different type of representative scenarios to identify potential exposure levels. It may be drinking water. So I do drinking water assessments, ecological risk assessments, their impacts based on the different uses of these chemicals in the label. And that's what I do with those results. So I know a lot of people talk about, and it happens. Like, again, you're adjusting accordingly because life happens. Some people may go to school for one thing and work and do something else. So even though I work with pesticides, with my background being wetlands, wastewater, my courses and some of the skills that I've acquired throughout school, graduate school, undergrad, they overlap. So technically I do utilize everything I went to school for in my present day job. So from there, I just found a couple things that I wanted to share that to make some of you guys think, like Black representation in STEM. And so a lot of times, people ask why STEM, and, STEM is important for students in everyday life simply by instilling in them the ability to understand and apply data and develop solutions to complex problems, which basically will be important for life skills. STEM job creation over the next 10 years will outspace non-STEM jobs significantly, growing 17% as compared to 9.8% for non-STEM positions. So when it comes to Black representation in STEM, it's remained critically low at all levels, from high school, undergraduate, graduate, and professional, for over 40 years, which highlights the need for innovative strategies that promote and retain Black students and professionals in STEM. Efforts have been refocused on increasing Black representation in STEM by promoting early exposure and continued engagement, like Mr. Pygott STEM class. These things are really good. And you guys, I'm not sure if you really do have a heads up. This class is pretty great to introduce you to some things and kind of get the ball rolling in the direction of things that you may want to do post high school. And also, lastly, I wanted to throw in there that in 2018, Black students accounted for only about 8.4% of bachelor's degrees, 8.3% of master's degrees, and 5.5% of doctoral degrees in STEM majors.
Wow. Now, and that was great. Thank you for that. Now, I think it's important, because I'm not gonna lie. I actually had I had trouble understanding and explaining before you showed us what it is you do. But I think it's important to understand that these type jobs are, with everything, with more people and with what we know about health now, this is something that's important to the health of the entire country. And
Mhm.
also, and on top of that, you're also talking about saving the companies tons of money, because if they've bought a bunch of land that they want to farm in, or they bought a bunch of land they want to develop a irrigation system, and they can't be used because of chemicals or whatever. That's a lot of money that's being wasted that could have been spent on something else. So
Mhm.
this is absolutely vital to not only our environment, but to our health as a whole, not only as public, but our economy as well.
Mhm.
Now also, obviously, and I know we're close to the same age. I'm not trying to date ourselves, but obviously technology has changed vastly
Mhm.
since you began doing this at Jackson State as an undergrad to now.
Mhm.
So what type of technological changes have you seen? Because I know you deal with a lot of geospatial data, and I know there's a growing trend in this area of drones. There's a
Mhm.
growing trend of 3D imaging and different technologies. What's some of the things that you've seen lately that you've had to learn?
Well, when it comes to like remote sensing, ArcGIS, I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do it, but because I did it in graduate school maybe 5 years ago, now we're getting ready to implement what we're working on, and we're currently doing ESA assessment, which is endangered species assessments, and we're using GIS with overlap, UDL. So these are some things I have to go back and try to learn. And it's a lot. It's a steep learning curve. And based off what I learned and how I use it in graduate school, it's totally different. It's really detailed, really tedious information. And recently I've gotten through how to do it because we're using Spider, Python, ArcGIS, but now it's about understanding it. So trying to put it together. So that's been a task for me. I'm up for the challenge, but that's something that I'm currently working on and with the technological shifts.
Yeah, and another thing, and I ask every guest the same thing. Um, you know, you deal with a lot of data and having to figure out how to interpret that. But how
Mhm.
often do you actually get it right the first time you see it?
I'm gonna go back to grad school. So just because it was something that's new, I may see something, and my advisor would see something totally different, in shifts and datas, and maybe I was on the right track with explaining it, and something fell off. So I mean, it's science, it's trial and error. So I'm not right every time. Majority of the time, I'm not right. So, but the good thing now here where I am, because we have so many different backgrounds, someone knows how to do it and someone can explain it to you. And then it's like a story. Everything is a story. So you're telling the story of the fate of a chemical, what happens in the environment, what happens while it's in a control setting in a lab, things change, whether it be photosynthesis related, whether it be hydrologically related, whether it be terrestrial related. Once it hits outdoors, you never know what's going to happen when things outdoors in the environment hit it. The impacts are totally different. So um, those are the things that I'm working on.
Yeah, it's just I always ask that because I think I can speak for all the teachers that'll see this later as well. One of the
Mm-hmm.
biggest frustrations we have is we're working on a project and the kids are like, "Oh, this is hard, I quit." And
Mm-hmm.
it's just, especially in STEM fields, that's just so unrealistic to think you're going to get it right the first time. But that's why these companies and these organizations need young people that have learned to think like that.
Mm-hmm.
Part of being successful in this field is learning to fix what you did wrong.
And that's a good thing. I think that's the beauty in science too, because it's always something that can grow from something. There's always an issue that you can add one little thing to it and it turns into something totally different. A lot of times when I feel like I don't get things right, I have to step away from it. I have to go refresh, do something completely different than what I was working on, reset mentally and come back to it. And a lot of times when I come back to it, then another light bulb went off, and it flows even better than it would have done previously when I was struggling with it.
Wow, and that's a great point. Sometimes if you give your brain a break, it comes up with a solution the way you wouldn't think. So
Mhm.
it's a lot of ways to train yourself in that. But I do have some good student questions here. This first one is Brian McMurtry. He's a senior.
What's his name?
Get- Brian McMurtry, and he's getting ready to join the Air Force upon graduation. So we're really proud of him for that. But this is a great question. He asked, as being an environmental fate scientist, do you think affects of disasters like the recent train derailment in Ohio have a negative effect on ecosystems and the environment?
Brian, that's a great question. Absolutely. The train crash, hurricanes. Another thing, like how I talked about the benefits of a wetland. Wetlands kind of clean up things that happen in the environment. So since wetlands are mainly coastal, you're thinking the coastal Mississippi, the Gulf. So different things that come in, land use, land cover change comes in. So a lot of these things play a factor. I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere down the line from where that train crash happened, that there's like some type of cancer outbreak around that area, or things like that. You think about Hurricane Katrina. Asthma was on the rise after Hurricane Katrina. You have
that was also the case after 9/11 because of the asbestos in the air.
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. That from the air. Like I think another thing, like the storms, it can another thing with wetlands, the degradation of them. You have people coming in with industry wanting to build. So because it's storing within the soils and within the plants to mitigate things that are happening, if you destroy them, like things that are there lying idle comes out into the atmosphere and environment. So absolutely, I wouldn't be surprised. I give it maybe 5 to 10 years.
Wow.
Something pops up. Think about also 9/11, the people, the ash, the soot, a lot of those people have passed away.
Yeah, Donna Summer was an example of that. She got lung cancer from there. Yeah, so yeah, that is a great question. But yeah, but again, that's some of the things in the environment we can't control, other things we can't, but there's things we have to be mindful of because it really affects everybody. This is a good one. This is Catherine Johnson. She's a junior. And she asked, what was your biggest motivation to keep going after your father got sick? And did you ever want to give up after he passed away?
Hi, Catherine. Another great question. Absolutely. I wanted to give up every day. I dropped out of grad school every day. I went back the next day, but sometimes you just have to want it as bad as you can breathe. You just want to change the narrative. I know how I grew up, the things that I didn't have, what I was exposed to, what I saw, and I just wanted something better for myself. So as long as there's breath in my body, I'm waking up the next day, I'm gonna keep pushing. So absolutely, not just me, plenty of people, because again, but with life happening, time is still passing by. So you can say, oh, this is going to take too long, or oh, I'm going to just work a little bit because I need to be able to take care of this or that. But while you're working, or while you're stopping doing whatever it is that you're stopping doing, time's still going to pass by. You look 5 years from now, you could have completed a program, you could have, you know what I mean, you could have done these different things. So absolutely, I mean, now I get frustrated and I'm like, you know what, I'm over this life stuff. Then the next day I walk away from the computer, start back over, and give it another shot.
Wow. Here's a good one. This is Jacayla Page. She's a sophomore, one of our volleyball and power lifters here.
Power lifters.
Yeah, and they just went to the state meet a few weeks ago. But she asked, how would you describe your overall experience at Jackson State?
So like I initially said, it wasn't my first choice, but I'm not sure if you guys see the signs that say choose Jackson State. I did. I think it's one of the best choices that I made, and I'm glad that I did it. I met a lot of people, and I know you kids say don't sleep on it, but don't sleep on Jackson State STEM program. They have a really great STEM program. Engineering, science, that Jackson State is they're business with it. So I was actually in a really good program. Marching in the band, my undergrad, that took up most of my time. So I didn't really get out and see what was going on until my senior year, my undergraduate year, but my undergraduate time at Jackson State. But yeah, Jackson State was great. Like with any place, they have their challenges, but met great people. I was in a really great program, so it was awesome.
Yeah, and we actually had Dr. April Tanner earlier this year, who's in the Jackson State Computer Science Department, and we've had other Jackson State STEM faculty and graduates as well. But one thing I always say, and I say this to every HBCU person we have, is that historically black does not mean exclusively black. And I think that's the narrative that needs to change. And it's
Yeah.
something that kids need to understand, because one thing I hear a lot here at Belma Jackson is, look, I know Jackson State or Alcorn, wherever, is a great school, but I want to go somewhere that's not all black people. I'm like,
Mhm.
well, Jackson State's not all black people. So I don't know why
Right.
we do that.
Well, you have.
It was founded on that, and it made me majority, but the international and non-minority enrollment has increased significantly in the last few years.
Mhm. And I'm not sure about what your group of students makes up, but sometimes if considered a minority at HBCU, scholarships are available. So there's always more than one way to skin a cat, and being a predominantly black school means nothing. It's a great experience. You meet some really good people. You can always do both. You can do one and give the other a shot if you want
Yeah, and
to.
when we've had some that have done that as well. We had a Jackson State alum last week. He's now at Washington University, St. Louis, which is a white Catholic school. So she did the HBCU undergrad and now doing the PWI Catholic school. So getting a great experience of both. So I encourage everyone, if that is a great route to go now, to do a PWI HBCU in any order. I think it really gives you a really good experience in college.
Yeah.
Here's a good one. This is Nakasha James, a senior, one of our basketball players here, going to go to Mississippi State and
Okay.
get into computer science. But she asked, do you think robots will start to have an impact on the environment?
Yeah, I do. Just looking at this, what is this? Chat GPT, am I saying it right? This artificial intelligence stuff. I think we are in for some crazy stuff in the near future. So I absolutely do. Which would be another good route to take. You said she wanted to major in computer science. I think computer science would be a great tool right now. In job security, you have IT, different types of surveillance issue computers and this type of stuff on a federal level. So I think computer science is definitely a good route to take.
And I know you work in the federal government, you see a lot of people with prior military experience as well.
Mhm.
So, I know we have Brian, who's going to go the Air Force route. If we have any other young people wanting to do Air Force, Navy, Space Force, all of them get great technological training that can definitely be used in your field, because they get the state of the art technology training at 18, 19 years old.
Mhm.
Here's another one. This is Justin Clerk. He's also a senior. He's going to also go into computers. He's really interested in video game design. He's really got a talent for that. And he asked, as a black woman in STEM, is there anything you would change about the way you are perceived in your career?
Um, from my personal experience, let's see how to word this. Sometimes it gets frustrating of having to prove yourself, or not being taken seriously because you're prejudged. So I think overall I would like for more better representation, um, more fairness, but it's kind of like um it motivates me, simply by you telling me what I can't do or what you don't think I can do because I'm black or because I'm a black woman. So, um, yeah, there's a lot that I would change, just in brief and leave it at that.
Yeah, and the way society is starting to tilt, these kids really have an opportunity to start changing that perspective even more. There's never been a better time than now.
Mhm.
So, and that's the thing, and that's why I've had so many people like you, see, because a lot of these kids don't see anything else that people look like them have done, but that
Mhm.
that narrative's changing, and the path is there, and people like yourself that have been trailblazers in it can really show that it can be done. And every industry needs to be indicative of the society that it represents.
Yeah.
And the more that changes, the more these kids see that, the more, first of all, they're gonna make way more money. Second, they're really going to be able to affect a lot of people in their community and really inspire people that come behind them.
Yeah.
All right, it's got one more. This is Aaliyah Chesser. She's a junior, and she asked, "What is the most fascinating part about your job?"
Um, Everything. It's a lot. It was a steep learning curve, but just the love that I have for science and how many different routes it can take, how it overlaps, like how broad it can be. Um, And knowing that even though it may be small, I'm responsible and I have some type of impact, when it comes to human health and environmental health.
Yeah.
The environmentalist and me, I think everything works hand in hand. I think if you cut a tree in New York, it's going to affect the ecosystem in Mississippi. So I love everything about my job. You're always learning. It's always something new. When I complete one thing, I think I understand, and then I can get a whole nother study that's the same study, and one little thing, and the environment changes. So it keeps me on my toes, and that's what I love about it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely not something that's monotonous. So if somebody wants to do something that's something different every day, this could be a great field to look into.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for taking some time for us. I know we've had to move this around a lot with everything going on, but it really is an honor to have someone of your stature join us now. But before we go, like we said, you are a PhD in a field that sees very little African Americans do it, but yet you did it.
Mm-hmm.
And you are from a similar area than we are here. Macomb's a small town in Mississippi. You grew up as a young Black student in Mississippi and got 3 degrees from a great university. So it can be done, and you're proof that it can be done. So what can these kids do now to follow in the footsteps of someone like you and be just as successful?
I think what I tell anyone, whether it be a student or an adult, I think it's important that you learn and know who you are, you know, and you stand firm in that. And if it's something that you want to do and you know in your heart that that is something that you want to do, don't let outside influences or negativities tell you what you can't do, not to do it. You don't have what it takes to do it. I'm telling you, whatever it is that you want to do, you can do it. Just to give an example, one of my friends, he's actually doing his residency at UAB, University of Alabama, Birmingham. First time he scored, I think a 12 on his MCATs. And that
Wow.
was enough to make anybody say, well, I'm not going, it's not for me. He went back, took it, got accepted to med school. You know, I'm not, I try not to, step on any toes when it comes to people's belief systems, but whatever your belief system is, I think that sometimes your detour is because it wasn't your time. Sometimes you're being protected from something.
Absolutely.
Sometimes the failure was something that maybe God, it felt like you need to be a little bit more prepared and you come back to it. So run towards failure because you're gonna fail. That's life. You're gonna fail. You're gonna want to quit, but you keep going and you never know what you'll embark upon or unfold to push you in the right direction or the next direction. So run to failure. Don't run from it. Don't be afraid to not do something because you think you're going to fail. Go fail, learn from what you failed, try again.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, what a great way to end our speakers this year for this class. It's been a real honor. I'm glad we finally got to do this. We've got to do it again sometime.
Me too. I'm so glad you had me.
Dr. Taimei Harris, all the way from Atlanta, Jackson State alum. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you soon, buddy.
Bye-bye.